We affirm C1 is trade-off. Spending is unsustainable. Gomez 15. Increased military spending would be difficult to sustain as long as China's spending is also growing. Deterrence through proaction still relies on intervention by outside powers. The issue is ineffective. It fails in Taiwan. Taiwan's roughly $19.7 billion backlog of arms sales in the United States finds itself way longer than other countries for the same weapons. Spending trades off. Tomorrow's 24. A number of scholars have condemned the United States $7 billion in military in Taiwan while American social programs are in need of funding. $95 billion emergency aid package for addition of guns, needed housing, healthcare, education, and debt relief. C2 is China reclassified as the U.S. Rule 19 since 1970. China's toned down revolutionary rhetoric pursued a cooperation approach and engaged in international community. China's active in the role in the UN. Taiwan can be seen in terms of security dilemma. China has protested arms with Taiwan tendencies. There's moves as an effort to change the disruption of power. U.S. influence resulted in China acting more aggressively. There's not much effort to support offensive reloads. Vote ops cause tension. Davis when he writes that miscalculation draws the United States into conflict. Vote ops are increasing the chances that the United States will one day stumble into war given expansion and number of vote ops against China. Drills increase tension too. China 24 writes that military drills risk confrontation or actions that can draw the United States. Beijing normalized the use of large-scale military weapons and analysts thought China's response to military exercises by the United States. An accident could plunge the huge sides into an escalation spiral, risking war. The specter of Chinese forces could scare off investors too. Additionally, sea drones are coming to Taiwan. Mickelson 24. Washington and Taipei launched an initiative to create sea drones, and by 2025, as a part of a strategy to counter invasion of Taiwan, unmanned systems are cheap and overwhelmingly opposed as well as degree capabilities. U.S. new AI UAVs create user-based pressure in China's guarantees first strike. Johnson 20. If states view nuclear subs at risk, drone swarms will be perception would create incentives to strike first. Encounters in Taiwan Strait would be action from deep stabilizing. U.S. AI enhanced UAVs threaten China's nuclear subs. Even if programs only threaten China's non-nuclear fleets, commanders fear their small SSBN fleet to be neutralized. Tensions rattled into miscal. Goes nuclear. Affirming is the only way to solve. Done 20. Misinterpretation of adversary driver conflict use of nuclear weapons, increasing readiness, be interpreted in preparation of escalation. Deployments of conventional military would be interpreted as a precursor. Conventional war is not often. Miscal is the only chance of conflict. Stacks 24. China called unification the essence of the country. Invading or a blockade would be the most complex operation in history. China's military has not fought a war in 7 decades. The Taiwan Strait is incredibly choppy and extreme, but invasion is viable a few months of the year. Transporting soldiers would take weeks and thousands of ships, which Taiwan would detect. China's amphibious fleet are small and Chinese cross view towards the economy by landing forces. Cliff are too steep for invading. Population that is only if possible via a tunnel which Taiwan can destroy. China can anchor ships far from Taiwan. Slowly, Taiwan is investing in anti-landing spikes. Plus, demilitarizing preserves U.S. cred. Laser 21. Even if it ended with Taiwan, the U.S. could preserve its credit. Allies would understand that Taiwan was less important. They are risk protecting much higher. Additionally, China fails to engage in diplomacy because of arms sales. West 24. By China, November 6, the Chinese delegation did not accept the proposal. PRC confirmed that China would not continue the dialogue, citing how, despite China's offers, the U.S. continued to send arms to Taiwan, severely undermining trust. Suspending arms sales historically led to sender relations. Lower 10. After a break caused by arms sales, the U.S. and China agreed to reopen talks. Arms security. Taiwan's request to buy aircraft has been put on hold. China would immediately break them off again if sales were approved. Independently of talks, after withdrawing troops, the U.S. increased diplomatic action. Top 23. U.S. needs to invest more in diplomacy. Military force drawbacks include siphoning dollars away. Over-reliance on force rather than diplomacy can harm U.S. reputation. Dialogue solves imminent miscalc. Simpson 24. Military-to-military dialogue can give valuable tool of greater understanding to mitigate miscalculation, escalation, and conflict, particularly between countries with tense bilateral relations. Additionally, bilateral dialogue solves military escalation, and UN 24 finds that intensifying U.S.-China rivalry will pose a major hurdle to cooperation between Korean denuclearization. China may suspend cooperation until the partner guarantees concession. In 2022, suspended cooperative initiatives punished the United States for policy visit Taiwan. China will only engage in cooperation. The United States to suspend arms with Taiwan. North Korea has caused a nuclear war. Only bilateral attempts to do legalized stall. Vision 22. The brink of nuclear war once the DRP conducts another test. A nuclear crisis will explode instantly. China and the U.S. are most important for them to resume dialogue. The ultimate should remain denuclearization. On the next card. Star Fortune terminalizes that nuclear would be massive destruction of ozone and global famine would leave the Earth uninhabitable for humans and nuclear winter. Thus be affirmed.
Contention by South Korea. U.S. assurances are credible at noon. Now, UN has backed down from nukes. Scout 24. Washington declaration. Reaffirmed partnership. RO3 expressed full confidence in the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Emerging anxiety is not overdone for threats. U.S. pledging to deploy assets to direct and telegraph commitment in exchange of UN agrees not pursue nuclear weapons. Both sides shore cooperation. Measures held calm stretches leading to the idea of independent nuclear capability. Affirming flips the SOCO fears that their abandoned nexus with the nuclear umbrella collapses. 21. Letting go of Taiwan suggests Washington abandoning commitment to Seoul. Becky questioned the price for its freedom as well. Abandoning Taiwan would raise fears of abandonment. It could bring down the system of alliances. U.S. nuclear return would bring all at once a PLA to Taiwan from the Korean Peninsula island is key in defense. Forces could not maintain assets and would be crushed. Box of assurance is SOCO proliferates. Top 22. SOCO will relinquish nuclear weapons, trusting America's umbrella. Alliance management is the core of U.S. grand strategy. Allies fear abandonment or the entrapment. If the U.S. seeks to reassure by detaching security commitments, the fear will precipitate. Pro of the urge for nuclear SOCO exists. Openly call call for nuclear armament should the umbrella fail. And Taiwan's protection is perceived as key to containing China. Self-protection efforts drive prolific. 16. Taiwan sits at the center of the Pacific, limiting Beijing's ability to threaten Chinese control would be subs on the island, access to Pacific allies who consider Taiwan essential to own security. Erosion of U.S. attention could consequence South SOCO going nuclear. Nuclear development triggers preemptive strike. Mil 23. A SOCO nuclear arsenal drive heightened temptation for NOCO to execute a preemptive attack against SOCO program in its infancy, eliminating capability before it's too complicated. NOCO's weak army leads conflict turns nuclear. Tele 23. NOCO has incentive to use nuke early in conflict on the peninsula as conventional military is inferior to forces against it. Extinction. Crim 19. 50 nukes would cause worldwide famine and extinguish humans. Global famine is likely outcome of limited use. Food insecurity events, disease, pandemics originate where traditional levels are poor. 1918 pandemic spread among more strong populations. Contention 2 is Taiwan. Xi has incentive to invade, cementing his legacy in CCP legitimacy. Braggart 23. Xi eager to go down as the leader to complete the test. However, Taiwanese favor the status quo. Those privileging unification, a fringe group. Xi would be 79. China has many domestic problems, slowing growth, rising debt, weak healthcare. Growth has been the main source of legitimacy as slow growth is the new normal. Leadership redirect discontent towards external enemies. Luckily, deterrence has led Xi to delay invasion indefinitely. 422. Taiwan might imperil the party power to give up on reunification. For this reason, the CCP cannot fail in invading Taiwan. The CCP has proven willing to display patience in its objectives. Strategic patience has been China's policy to not strategies not require the use of FIFA PLA. It merely asks Beijing to continue with patience by leading leaders to the conclusion that today is not the day. Beijing would preserve its reunification inevitable political posture indefinitely. Thus, invasion isn't coming. Best indicators prove. Day 24. Speculation captures headlines such as certain real probability. It would be more accurate to track 3 data points ahead of war. China attempted to shrink exposure to financial pressures, selling treasuries. China comes holdings in short time for war with Taiwan is likely. Another number is food self-sufficiency. China imports a third in the conflict. The Navy cut off trading routes. The self-sufficiency ratio will need to be much greater. The U.S. interdict Chinese oil. China will need reserves to fight. China will telegraph intentions far in advance. Building of stocks requires years. Probability of war is low. Firming flips Chinese calculus. Presence is key to deny success and impose costs. Early 23. Deterrence is working in Taiwan. It has for 70 years. Today's PLA is improving, but invading in the face of U.S. opposition remains the most daunting operation considered. Risk of failure will remain high. War would devastate all China's future priorities. Win or lose, the party's power would be at risk. Even if denial is undermined, country will remain strong. Operation cannot succeed. Conflict would go nuclear. Attacks on conventional targets affect second strike, forcing user or loser pressure on China's streets. Round 21. Chinese conventional and nuke forces rely on the same infrastructure. Attacks against comms would cut nuclear force. If nuke forces were degraded, authorities conclude they no longer have deterrent. China would be faced with user or loser pressures exacerbated by the fog of war. And the risk of conflict debts global markets. Johnson 23. Taiwan is central to global trade. Taiwan is a critical semiconductor hub. China remains important manufacturing and trade. Conflict in Taiwan imposes substantial costs. Markets react in advance of physical disruption. Uncertainty about military response, U.S. military response to amplify market reactions. PRC force met with sanctions. Economic decline causes diversion, war, and multiple nuclear hotspots. Jump 24. Leaders facing unrest seek divergent targets. Scholars attributed Ukraine and Turkey along with China's actions against India, Japan, and Taiwan to economy. Slow growth makes one state weaker to favor competitive, reversing economic drive states and circumstances. Cross-applied period from above new policy. You can take those questions.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about your argument of Taiwan, right?
Yes.
You told me that a recession is going to cause a nuclear war, right?
You said that the loss of Taiwan is semiconductor.
So recession leads to nuclear war, right?
Oh, like economic, I'm sure.
Wait, so can you give me an example in history as to when this happened?
Sure. You say that there's going to be diversion in war, like for example, Ukraine and Crimea as well as Taiwan.
You say a nuclear war is going to happen, are we all still here?
Sure. We can make analysis as to why this recession would be unique and why this
Okay, why would this recession be unique?
Sure. A couple of reasons. First, we would say that right now China is already looking at slow growth per the uniqueness that we've been on top, specifically talking about how she needs a new source of CCP legitimacy. That's another one, and then obviously Willie can talk.
So can I ask you another follow-up?
I want a question.
Sure, you can take a question.
Alright, let's talk a little bit about offensive realism. What does it mean to be an offensive realist?
It just means that you're like trying to gain the
Okay, flip it question. What does it mean to be a defensive realist?
It just means that you're defensive in your interests.
Like, what does it mean defensive in your interests?
Like, you're trying to cooperate with other countries and things like that. Is what defensive realism is, right?
Where are your instances about?
Or geopolitical evidence that specifically says that.
It says offensive realism. Can you tell me where it defines what that means?
I mean, it's pretty well known what it means. China is
Like,
cooperating.
based off your example, I'm not sure.
The geopolitical evidence explicitly says that China is cooperating with every other place but Taiwan because the U.S. is there. That's what's highlighted in our evidence.
China is cooperating because it serves its interests. So what does it mean in terms of interest for offensive and defensive reasons?
Our evidence explicitly highlights that China is trying to talk with other countries. The only place it's not because it wants, like, I don't know, because it wants it.
You can contest that.
Okay,
So
sure.
you can take a question.
Yeah, sure. Okay. You said that China's in economic decline right now, right?
Growth is slowing.
Okay, cool. So can I just ask you a logical question?
Sure.
If a country's in economic decline, how hard is it for them to A, invade a full country, like a full state, and B, like how would they do so if their economy is already bad?
Sure. We're saying that right now they're not going to invade. Our argument is this, right? The pay evidence is very clear in War 3 that right now China isn't preparing for invasion. However, what our argument is that when you take away, when Affirmative takes away presence, that allows China to do that. And furthermore, I think you're missing a lot of the warning you're doing on what China does when they're in economic decline. I'm getting there. Don't you worry about that. What China does when they're in economic decline, because they're slowing growth, because of that is why she is rallying around the flag and redirecting all of this internal discontent towards external enemies, which is
You're not answering my question.
What was your question?
My question was, if a country is in economic decline, how can they invade something that's far from them?
I mean, you can argue they have the capability.
I mean, you just said they don't have the capability right now.
Right
What's
now.
changing when you take out?
They develop the capability, they start investing.
And so your link is basically invasion, right?
Sure.
On their South Korean proliferation argument, 1. No Selco proliferate. 4 warns why it won't happen. Figure 23. Violate the NPT or require Seoul to withdraw. Korea imports all uranium and does not have a stockpile, nor enrichment or reprocessing facilities, require civilian material and converting reactors. It would take at least 2 years to reach a few bombs reduction program, violate the U.S. Cooperation Agreement (AEA). Government faced fierce resistance to host the test site, trigger U.S. sanctions, divert enormous amount of defense budget away from critical requirements. 2nd, dealing costs are too high to nuclearize. Kim 20, policymakers are aware of the serious consequences, harsh economic and political sanctions, the end of the U.S.-South Korea alliance, and the required withdrawal from key international alliances. 3, dealing South Korea does not have resources and would risk their international reputation. Rare 23, there are flaws in SOCO, a nuclear infrastructure in the country lacks uranium requiring capacities, and SOCO is part of the NPT. The country would have to withdraw, losing international reputation. Its closest allies are not favorable to the decision. Their own evidence in case says South Korea wants its allies and needs allies to help deter China in Southeast Asia. If their allies leave because they proliferate nuclear weapons, they're simply unable to combat Chinese assertiveness. 4th, South Korean leaders don't want a Taylor 24 opposition argument prevails among SOCO elites who carry more weight in defense and security to 66% for against it. It's a democracy. Obviously, their own evidence is pro-nuclearization. This does not matter. This is a democracy in South Korea. They need the majority of people to agree with it as well. 5th, prolific is slow. There's no impact. Mueller 20. The pace of prolific has been far slower than predicted. Consequences have been substantially benign. Alarmists have been wrong for decades. Dozens of technology-capable countries have obtained arsenals. Very few have done so. Then 6th, turn in credibility concerns lead to closer relations. Part of 23. If a future administration were to reduce support of Taiwan, concerns about U.S. credibility would lead allies who seek closer relations with the United States. Then 7th, it's not historically verified. Afghanistan, Iraq, and cost Taiwanese reductions prove no link to proliferation as well. No alliances were destroyed whatsoever. Sweden 23. Optics associated with U.S. withdrawal undermined Washington's endeavors to portray itself as a champion of human rights. Reputation correlates with its diminishing soft powers. A decline as a result of withdrawal from Afghanistan and growing insurgence of allies in the Persian Gulf. However, there was no impact to proliferation back then. Ask yourself why there's going to be uniquely an impact right now if it didn't happen back then. It's not historically verified. 8. Their fake evidence about Taiwan is crucial. It's from Japan's perspective, not South Korea. It's really bad. 9. Credibility theory is wrong. Vicious 16. There's a problem with cred. Scientists have disproven it. States are not people, and there's no evidence allies change behavior based off of credibility or reputation even exists. Broader deep evidence dispels the notion all records shows do not matter. On Taiwan. First, on their market penning link, U.S. military reduction did not trigger their impacts. Defense 24. Taiwan's agreed supplier semiconductors on July 28, 2023. The president authorized the draft of $345 million in DoD defense articles and services Taiwan, but there is no impact. On their link specifically about invasion, 1. China cannot invade Taiwan. Dominguez 24. 1. Bringing Taiwan to heel is not a requirement for CCP to remain in power. Nowhere in China is rallying for unification with Taiwan. 2. Econ, diplo, and political cost. 3. China's military is unlikely. The PLA is a full-scale invasion. Even if China wanted to, its corruption from their economy is fragile. 4. No impact of proliferation. 20. Proliferations are rare and destabilizing effect is quite small. For Operation Nuclear War was ever undertaken remaining below the weapons special spend. Years that mark of 29 of 39 have not acquired a nuclear owed to the technology and material challenges. Nations failed. Several undertaken reversal, banning their allies. 3rd, Neuron 22. 1. War is 3rd, no invasion. War is expensive. Neuron 22. War is expensive. China is in no position to spend heavily. Real estate crisis have only been deepening, staring at the increasing inflation cannot afford a war. to Taiwan is armed to the teeth. You cannot compare Taiwan and Ukraine as troops randomly greeted with artillery shelling gunfire from different bunkers and bunkers of 3 Japanese angle of China. Japan is vowed to defend Taiwan against Chinese military. Cut that card at the bottom. Their ground evidence does not say nuclear war will happen. Just as it forces war to be degraded, they have to win that someone is going to attack China first, and their force will be degraded. This is not equal to a Chinese nuclear war. It doesn't even say the word nuclear in it. Fifth, their junk evidence is really bad. It does not say nuclear war will happen. An aggressive stance, quote, their last line of their evidence does not necessarily mean a nuclear war is going to happen. Ask themselves why this is even going to happen. The war simply isn't there. But B, their own evidence says global economic output is uncertain in the wake of COVID. No nuclear war happened back then. Ask yourself what's going to happen now. But look, they have no impact scenario to their argument about Taiwanese invasion. Their only impact evidence that says nuclear war is from an econ decline. We've already taken out the econ decline. Yes, good.
The easiest place to vote is on the last 2 cards we read, being Johnstone. It tells you, quote, markets react in advance of actual physical disruptions. Uncertainty about military responses amplifies military reactions. It affects so much of the global economy because A, so much commerce uses the strait, and B, Taiwan is key to semiconductors which are needed in so many products. This takes out their response about how it has to go global because this is exactly why it has to go global. A, semiconductors, and B is key to global trade. Economic decline escalates diversity wars in numerous hotspots. It drives more Chinese aggression in India, Japan, Taiwan, and was the impetus for Ukraine and Crimea, which is why you should prefer us on the probability already because it's empirically proven, whereas none of the scenarios are true. At that point, let's go down the responses specifically. They tell you that in the past we pulled out of Taiwan. That's not true. Call for their evidence. The defense evidence, we use presidential drawdown authority to actually give more aid to Taiwan. It does not talk about a removal of aid from Taiwan. The evidence is misconstrued so badly here. Then, their junk evidence talks about they say that it's not going to cause it go nuclear. However, our junk evidence talks about diversionary war from China, and the brown evidence is also conceded, which is because China's conventional capabilities share nuclear capabilities. Any war in which China engages in conventional conflict very likely puts pressure and makes China feel as it's going to lose its second strike capability, which is why it lashes out and goes nuclear. That's also the warrant that they use on UUVs. At that point, we would say again, anything else?
By the way, you say like COVID should not.
They say that COVID should have already triggered, but they've conceded that in case for the Greiger evidence that China is on edge now and that its economy is uniquely in a dire spot, which is why he's more likely to fall on like escalation to distracted people. That's in case conceded as well. At that point, concession should frame your voting for us. Go to trade-off. 1. Their evidence says that packages for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan cut funding from schools and whatnot, meaning the affirmative doesn't solve since Congress will just spend it on Ukraine and Israel. 2nd, turn the argument. It increases Chinese aggression, which causes the US to get drawn back in and do more operations. Why 24? 12% of Chinese coercive acts were preceded by perceived hostile foreign move. 88% were opportunistic against vulnerable targets. This should outweigh because it's all over the region, not just in Taiwan. Let's go to China. 1. Cross-applied wise. It answers the Jalil evidence better in 2 ways. A. It's more recent by 5 years. And B. Accounts for shifts in China's mindset per Greiger on top of Taiwan. And it's a big picture analysis, not just specific examples. 2nd, affirming doesn't reduce phone-offs. Look at their Eleanor evidence. It talks about how the U.S. does so on behalf of Philippines, Vietnam, and in the South China Sea, not the Taiwan Strait. 3rd, they tell you that drills are going to escalate to war. That's not true. The existence alone of hotline solved. Miller 21. The existence of the hotline reflects in recognition of mutual interest in avoiding catastrophic outcomes that ascribe possible paths to war. Prefer this over China. China is literally a floating plane with no war. You should hold the line there. 4. We would say that on UUV specifically, we've been uncovering them for a while. Farade 23 writes, anti-submarine drills are increasing as are deployments of sub-hunting aircraft and other advanced technologies. The U.S. is carrying out the biggest overhaul of undersea surveillance since the 50s. That postdates the Johnson evidence, which is A, abstract, and B, 4 years old, which postdates the hotline response and proves the hotline response. 5. Their done evidence is non-unique. It talks about how increases in readiness, and things like space systems, cause China to feel insecure anyways, to the point where that's true. The U.S. is always modernizing nukes, and it happens anyway. 6. The Sachs evidence is mitigation at best. It's all reasons why it'd be difficult or hard to win, but not reasons as to why it is impossible. 7. On Glacier, Alex won't be sure for Zinger 21. Glacier's wrong. South Korea lying in the middle of China's A2AD envelope. Rest of Asia and Australia covered by the same missiles. Which of them would the U.S. abandon next? Insofar as they fear their next, they're still going to respond. We would say that this turns all their arguments because they are forced to independently develop capabilities, which causes more risk of accidents. Then their top evidence is wrong. We empirically don't. We wouldn't, or their Lochner evidence is wrong. We empirically don't do diplomacy. The endgame when Obama pulled out of the region was worse ties because China just started being assertive in, for example, the Philippines. And what Sheevis 23 writes that American politicians don't want to work with China now because they're hawkish and anti-China. And lastly, we would say that I still like 5 seconds. But like, okay. The French evidence conceived later in the article that other issues derail the relationship anyways.
This is like a clarifying thing, like you respond to Glazer, which is a credibility argument, but then you concede like Soko. Are you going to be going for a credit-based argument later?
A credibility-based argument, yes. Or potentially.
Okay.
I don't know. Alexis
Okay,
will
so-
make those decisions. I don't know. So I'm thinking.
Wait, what?
Let's talk about UUV. Like, you asked the question. Can I get one?
Yeah, you got it.
Alright, cool. Let's talk about UUV. So, has the U.S. uncovered second, or like, has the U.S. been supporting Taiwan in the past?
Yes.
Have we had sub-surveillance in the past? Surveillance in general in the past?
Yeah.
So, why has your impact not?
Because our argument is that it's the Johnstone evidence, which is that specifically in 2025 there's going to be a shipment of UUVs delivered to Taiwan.
You said that we've already been uncovering
second
by subs.
They're
right?
going to be AI powered and unmanned, which is uniquely going to trigger our
Why is AI unique?
because it's going to cause miscalculations. It's
Oh,
also
just
more
like how?
advanced. It's also more advanced than the ones that
How are
China
they
has.
more advanced?
Okay, it is more advanced than the UUVs that China has, which is why China's going to uniquely perceive this as a threat.
Why
And
does
that's the-
AI make it more advanced?
Because no wait, AI makes it uniquely more advanced because you don't have to put a person in it. It's an unmanned vehicle, but you have AI in
How
it.
does that make it more capable at destroying or locating second strike subs?
Look, okay, when it's AI, it can be more methodical, more precise because it does not have human intervention. The thing is, China is lacking, but also China is lagging behind the US in these UUVs.
Which is the evidence?
It's the Johnstone evidence.
Which, like, reading the line says China's lagging behind.
Hold up. Do another question.
Yeah, sure. Like, so, yeah, I mean, you can give me an answer, but we can talk about your argument about. Okay, so let's talk about incidents, right? So you tell me that, like, we've been doing phone ops. Like, how long have we been doing phone ops?
For the past 40 years, but
Only the last 4 years,
conceded,
okay.
the conceded Davis evidence. Okay, the only thing you would notice is the other evidence, at least right after the Davis evidence, where it says that phone ops are functionally illegal the way they do it, because essentially, okay, a phone op is a freedom of navigation
you never
operation.
let. Okay, well,
You're meant to
I get a
ask.
follow up.
Okay, you're meant to ask permission before you do those operations. The problem is the U.S. does not ask Chinese permission before they invade or do phone ops
So
in that region.
U.S. has done phone ops before. You agree on that? And they've been doing like illegal phone ops before, right? So why has the impact not triggered?
Okay, first of all, you can see it's eventually going to happen, which is
Eventually?
the
Okay,
Davis
why?
evidence. It's eventually going to happen because
Wait,
eventually
what?
there's going to be miscommunication between the two, causing nuclear war.
So why has there not been miscommunication today?
Well, we would argue that that's wait. There hasn't been miscommunication because we're lucky. Ours is that it's eventually going to happen.
Lucky?
Because you can see the Davis evidence.
Okay, so when does the miscalculation scenario happen?
There's no time frame of
No
it, but
time
you give us 100% probability here because it literally says it's imminent. So
Okay, so what is the reason as to why it hasn't triggered in the past? Just
okay,
why?
I'll take the question.
So,
It's fine.
to be
You've
clear,
been asking the same
years.
thing.
Okay, so to be
Okay,
clear,
our
years of foreign. Okay,
there's okay.
years of
phone ops
operations. Like we've been doing this for years, and we've been getting lucky for like decades.
Okay, uniquely now it's destabilizing. Also, you can see that it's imminent.
Why?
Very quickly on trade-off, they say it increases Chinese aggression. Group the Chinese aggression and the why is better evidence, and they don't actually do the comparative here. Look towards the actual evidence. It says nothing specific about the US and Taiwan, but our Jalil evidence highlights the fact that the reason as to why China is so aggressive in the Taiwan Strait is because of US presence. That's important because we give specific examples of China being empirically better in other places like the UN and taking an active role there. But the reason as to why they're not doing an active role in the in Taiwan and Taiwan is because the US is there. That's like terrible evidence they have. Then we can see that Aff has no reaction to phone ops, so we kick that. Then they say that drills don't escalate and hotlines solve. Hotlines are genuinely not working because insofar as tensions exist, that means it's not working. Then they say we've been undercovering now like the submarines, but no, we're gonna go for this argument. We tell you that AI UUVs are the most unique argument in the round because it's functionally conceded. Our argument is purely perceptual, extended. Sea drones are coming to Taiwan now by 2025. That's the McKinnell's in 24 evidence, which shows that unmanned systems are achieving large amounts of overrun their opponents. Additionally, they have conceded the Johnson evidence, which shows that US AI UUVs can cause China to first strike. That's inherently bad because that means that insofar as our link triggers by 2025 and these shipments are going to be viewed antagonistically by China, China's going to first strike and that's going to cause a nuclear war because of the fact that once China first strikes, it draws in the US and inherently a nuclear war will cause the world to be too cold and too dark for humans to exist. That's the cleanest place to vote. Additionally, just from like some other stuff, they say that SACS mitigation at best. I'll cover that on their case. On the Herzinger says Glazer is wrong. That's not a warning as to why Glazer is wrong. Insofar as we tell you that Glazer says the fact that Japan and South Korea believe they are more of a commitment to the US than Taiwan, it's literally gain over there because no allies lose credibility. Also, our arms tells really specifically. They say politicians don't want to work together, but we frontline. Okay, but the frontline, yeah. Trump doesn't take out relations. The Mao evidence explicitly says that they hope the two sides work well and present of mutual respect, coexist, and win-win cooperation to enhance dialogue. This means the fact that both countries want to work together. It's empirically going to work. So you need to outweigh the U against the perceptual argument. We tell you that detection doesn't even matter insofar as it'll happen by 2025. Nuclear was pretty clean there. Go to their case. Their case is really bad insofar as they don't frontline a single thing on Taiwan. They try and tell you that U.S. military reductions didn't cause, like they say, markets will react well in advance, but they don't actually respond to our argument. We tell you that when you stop military reduction in the past, none of their impacts trigger. One, their impact is really bad. They just say an aggressive stance. That doesn't lead to a nuclear war. You can't give them any access to any of their impact. An aggressive stance doesn't lead to anything. When you were in a recession during COVID-19, no wars happened, so you can't give them the evidence there. Additionally, they have conceded the reason as to why pro-lift won't happen. On South Korea specifically, they try going for it. They won't because of sanctions, and they don't want to be sanctions. But also, on their argument about China won't invading, they've also conceded the evidence from our case, which shows the fact that China won't invade because of Taiwan having anti-landing spikes and the geography being too hard. Additionally, they conceded Glazer in and of its entirety, meaning that credibility is always going to be there.
Extend our argument on markets. Markets react in advance of actual physical disruptions. Uncertainty about military responses in Taiwan amplifies market reactions when the U.S. withdraws, investment withdrawals as well. It affects so much of the global economy with so much commerce uses the strait, and Taiwan is key to semiconductors needed for so many products. Economic decline escalates diversionary wars in multiple hotspots. It drives Chinese wars with India, Japan, and Taiwan, and was the impedance for Ukraine and Crimea empirically. Any war with China goes nuclear. The ground warranty is conceded. An attack on China's conventional capability then is conceded an attack on their nuclear capabilities because they use overlapping infrastructure. That's their argument from UUPs. Per they limited nuclear strike from China in response to the pandemic disease that kills all. Let's go on to the responses because they do a lot of extending. They don't do a lot of responding to what Willie told you in his past speech. The first thing they say is that defense evidence shows that we decrease the amount of spending. No, they can see the fact that that was presidential drawdown specifically so that we could decrease spending in one area and then increase aid in another area. It wasn't the same argument. It isn't the same thing as withdrawing our link evidence is. But second, they say that it doesn't lead to nuclear war and an aggressive stance doesn't lead to anything. First, I can talk about this on the way when I explain as to why we link to their impact. But they also concede that a conventional attack happens and that conventional attack is what causes China to strike back in the event of the attack happening because of this shared infrastructure. The last thing that they say is that COVID didn't lead to a war. Remember, they've also conceded Willie's analysis of the Riker evidence from our Taiwan argument talking about how Xi is in a uniquely bad place. He has slow growth in his economy. There's bad healthcare. People are unhappy. And in order to redirect this discontent uniquely now is when he escalates into warfare. Now, let's go on to the Wang debate first. We most definitely link it to their case, even if you don't buy that an attack triggers a nuclear war. It's conceded that there is more assertiveness from China during economic downturn, more exercises seem stronger that make every single scenario of theirs more likely, and furthermore, they're less likely to communicate with the U.S. to seem like they're not weak and capitulate further Riker evidence, which shows that when China's economy is weak, they rally around the flag and become more offensive. That's the better link into their scenario on scope that outweighs, because more Chinese presence means a greater chance of collision, and more drills means greater tensions and escalations with any actor, and outweighs because China withdraws from diplomacy when they're economically stressed. But even then, on other mechanisms, first on probability, years of incidents have never triggered their analysis. We already have UUVs in the region that empirically cause, but meanwhile, also the economic scenario, it empirically cause aggression with India, Japan, Taiwan, and Ukraine and Crimea. And insofar as we prove why it's unique to now for the Riker evidence, you're voting for us on probability and on time frame. It's perceptual and instant decline and instant increase in impression. Even our impact doesn't trigger first. Our link definitely does before August of 2025. And insofar as we link into their impact, we short circuit their case, and their impact triggers faster on our side. You're always voting for us on the impact level, but even then, on their case, on their argument specifically about UUV, they're definitely not winning because they have conceded Willie's Toronto analysis that finds that we are already uncovering subs in the region. They just say that AI means greater capability. That doesn't matter insofar as even if you have a greater capability, insofar as capabilities now are enough to already uncover subs, this should have triggered already. It is perceptual. Their argument on uncovering subs and China's second strike should have happened. It never happens because of the fact that China doesn't actually it doesn't happen. That clumsy scenario pretty clearly. All empirics go down.
So your whole main focus on the fact that if you withdraw, it's going to cause physical disruptions. That's going to cause
So here's our argument, right? Investors
in global economies feel that if the US leaves Taiwan, then Taiwan is vulnerable to invasion. And they're scared for two reasons. A, because the Taiwan Strait is key to the global commerce of so many countries and so many companies, and they're scared because, for example, semiconductors are key to so many goods.
Okay.
When you have such a big market crash, that triggers the global economic crisis that we have described.
You've conceded in the last speech that Taiwan will never invade, okay? But second,
Sure, Taiwan will never be invaded, but that doesn't respond to the argument because investors
we responded to
allow me to finish, right? Investors aren't necessarily going for hundreds of pages of arguments. They're only looking at their intuition, and our argument is that their intuition is that when the U.S. pulls out and there's no deterrence, that China is likely to invade. But none of this is explicitly true.
No, it isn't explicitly front line. They say that.
Definitely not in rebuttal.
Okay.
But I'm taking a question. It's been a while.
Wait, you asked me a
Can I
question.
take a question?
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk about UUVs. So
Okay.
what is AI unique?
AI is unique because it can control different things inside of it. Yeah.
It's also
What does that mean?
It's also
Wait,
more
wait,
advanced than China is.
Wait, so
right? That's also
let me let me go back to that.
Yeah.
What things can AI control that humans can't, and what are those things that
There
are?
are so many things that can move on its own. It can.
I mean, I feel
Wait,
that
so-
the definition of a UUV is something that can move on its own, regardless of whether or not they are.
Wait, so the way it moves is what makes China
there's
scared.
more reasons as to why.
Okay, so what are those reasons?
One, it can detect things better. Two, it can.
Why? How does it detect AI?
It's
Wait,
AI.
AI is more
You can't
precise
just
than
say
a
it's
human is.
AI.
I'm explaining it. AI is more precise than a human is, which is why, it's why ChatGPT and OpenAI and things like
Okay,
that.
sorry,
exist
if your
because they are
ChatGPT keeps getting my calculus
Okay,
work wrong, I don't think
let
it's
me-
more like.
Okay, there's a reason why you're using it in the first place, okay? Basically, the thing about ChatGPT is AI in general is overall more precise than humans are, which is why people use it. So how does AI detect things? Because it's a
That's not
software.
You're not understanding
It
our
can't
argument.
physically
You are not
detect
understanding our argument. It's not about detection. You have okay, listen. It's about the perception of these new AI UVs being implemented.
Wait,
That's
also, it does not
But
matter
now
if
we
the
get back to the
UUVs
same
crash
question.
and
What
burn.
about
Okay,
AI
wait,
makes
let
it
me
so
just-
scary?
Okay, it does not matter if the UUVs crash and burn. You have considered that the shipment of the UUV, i.e. the idea that it's eventually going to be implemented that triggers our impact.
The idea that it's
Wait,
going to be
also,
implemented in
you're
Target.
that's the
What's
Johnson-
up? Wait. The idea that it's going to be implemented and eventually uncover Chinese legal zones.
No,
Perfect.
No, that's not.
The
what?
Johnson
They're gonna strike right when they see US sending UUVs to.
Because they're afraid that the UUVs can take over their second threat.
Sure, I don't.
Perfect.
It doesn't
Okay,
matter
that's
what
fair.
China. Yeah, I'm gonna finish it. It doesn't matter what China thinks, insofar as it's been conceded that they're still going to act that way. Wait, if China doesn't think this is true, then
China does its conceded evidence. We can read you the piece of evidence that shows that US UAVs threaten China's nuclear subs and also the
That's all I need, don't worry. And also those girls.
In summary, the word arms deals was not said by my opponents once. The reason is simple. It is historically verified. In 2010, when we reduced our arms deals to Taiwan, there was an increase in military diplomacy. They have also conceded that miscalculation is imminent, and the root cause of tensions in the Taiwan Strait is because the U.S., that is the Jalil evidence, has been conceded in case. At that point, we have the uniqueness is extended, and the impact is also extended. The impact is the dialogue solves back for miscalculation. Also, it's also historically verified. Wait, some history because in 2010, when we stopped our arms deals to Taiwan, we saw an increase in diplomacy. Also, that is 100% conceded, 100% strength of link. Miscalculation goes nuclear through a Chinese first strike, and the dialogue between both countries is able to solve back for the Chinese first strike, which goes nuclear, and nuclear war causes extinction through a nuclear winter. 100% conceded for the last speech. It's game over. On UUVs. They can see that the only basis for uncovering subs right now, but no, their subs aren't the ones that we're talking about. What we're talking about is AI-powered UUVs that are unique. They can see that right now, by 2025, we're going to increase the amount of siege drones that are going to China. The Johnson evidence is also going to see that the perception of the shipment of UUVs is what triggers our impact. On way. One time frame is 2025, it's been conceded. That's where the drones go. Second is a first strike causes market panic. Obviously, tensions in the Taiwan Strait cause market panic. A Chinese first strike will also trigger this impact. But third, and the biggest argument is their own evidence says perception of tensions causes market panic. They have conceded the only reason why tensions exist is because of the U.S. in the region. That is the Jalil evidence. We solved back for that. We fundamentally solved back for the tensions that cause market panic. On my anecdote. They say intuition, but no, they can see U.S. diplomacy will be in the region, which solves back for any intuition of investors. Also, they can see that in the past we stopped it. There was no trigger of the impact. One, we withdrew $343 million of Taiwanese aid. Second, we stopped arms sales in 2010. Where was the market panic? Also, they can see the aggressive stance just means no nuclear war. The only thing they say is it's a conventional war. One, this is new in summary, but also it's a double bind on them because they can see that China will never go into a conventional war because if economy is bad. They say assertiveness goes up, but no, the only reason assertiveness even exists in China even exists is because of the Jalil U.S. root cause evidence. Use that breaks down. They can see that they link into their arguments tensions. They can say hard to redirect. it's game over.
Markets is 100% conceded. Markets react in advance of actual physical disruption. Does not say they react in advance of tension, but actual physical disruption. For example, it turns out military responses amplifies market reactions, and when the US withdraws, they withdraw too. It affects so much of the global economy, which is why the investor impact is so wide. For example, so many countries are affected by commerce in Taiwan Strait, and so many companies are affected by semiconductors. That's why when the investors are scared of what happens in Taiwan and they pull out, the crash goes global and has ramifications globally. For example, it's what caused Ukraine, Crimea, it's what has caused Chinese tensions with Japan, India, Taiwan, etc. At that point, they have also conceded that it goes nuclear because any escalation of China goes nuclear because the ground warriors conceded that any attack on Chinese conventional capability is also potentially an attack on their nuclear capability, which is also their warranting on the UUV arguments. At that point, both sides agree that nuclear war causes extinction. They give you a big deal about not answering the diplomacy link, but insofar as all of their weighing is on UUVs, that doesn't necessarily matter. Time frame, first strike, and perception of tension is all on UUVs, and insofar as they don't extend that scenario, it's game over. They can't access UUVs because our defense is 100% conceded, which is that in the past, we have already put uncovering a second strike sub in Final Focus, no response list, and also no clear warrants as to why AI is unique, which is why 4 years since Johnson's written, you seeing US advancement in the region, you should have seen the impact happen, but it doesn't. At that point, we definitely link in and win. Let's talk about the Lincoln. We link into their case because even if you don't buy that an attack triggers a nuclear war, it's conceded that causes China, Russia, so many actors to be more aggressive and they do more exercises, which causes the higher risk of escalation and accidents per their argument. It could be, and it outweighs on scope because not only is it in China with Taiwan, it could be with the Philippines, it could be with Japan, it could be South Korea, etc. And it's other countries such as Russia who also do because they're also affected by the economic shock. To the point where that's true, you should feel comfortable voting for us. But even on their case, they're not winning the argument because arms sales is not the argument. They go for summary, they go for UUVs. However, we would still, and then on UUVs proper, again, extend the fact that their impact should have already triggered.